What's going on, everybody? Peyton Smith here. And today I want to talk about something a little bit outside of my expertise, but it's something that I've dealt with a lot through my career as a freelancer. And I want to talk about anxiety and how anxiety can kind of run your life and your day as a freelancer, in particular when it comes to client or potential client phone calls, meetings. This is something that I've seen throughout my career where I've got a call at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the entire day leading up to that, I've got a pit in my stomach, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm thinking of like worst case scenarios, and it really can ruin your entire day, and it makes it harder to be productive, to be positive, and I hate days like that because I feel like my entire day is wasted just being anxious and anticipating this client call, which inevitably goes just fine, and I realized that there was nothing to worry about in the first place. So in today's video, I want to share 3 tips that can instantly put your anxiety in check and help you control that so that you can go about your day being productive, and you can go into these calls, meetings, and presentations with more confidence and more positivity. So let's get started. So in preparation to share step 1 with you guys, I need to take you back to a story from my old football days. When I started Little League football, I was back in, I think, like 4th grade or something like that. And football was scary, especially for a guy like me that I was really small, I was skinny, I was weak, and I would just get absolutely pummeled at practice every day. And it was frustrating and it was scary, and sometimes it felt like the coaches were like always putting me up against the biggest, scariest guys, and I was just getting absolutely wrecked every day at football, and it wasn't very much fun for me at first. And that didn't change until one day my coach told me, Peyton, if you don't want to get destroyed at practice, you need to start being the hammer instead of the nail. And I think that that idea really can correlate to so many different parts of life, because when you think about it, a hammer and a nail, they both take the same impact, right? They're both smashing into one another, but it definitely is a lot easier for the hammer than it is for the nail. And obviously the nail is the one that gets absolutely destroyed and plastered into a wood or a wall or whatever it is. And so if you think about it, even though both of those take the same impact, it's much, much easier to be the hammer, and it's going to hurt a lot less if you are the hammer in the situation. And so in a football sense, it hurt a lot less when I was the one doing the hard hitting, right? So if I was sitting there really nervous and kind of timid, and I was waiting for the hit, that impact always hurt a lot worse for me. Where in the reverse side, when I changed my mentality and I decided that I was going to be the one that was going to do the hitting, yes, it still hurt a little bit, but it hurt a lot less. And that mentality not only changed my mind for the better, but it also changed the mind of those that were going up against me at practice, because then they knew that I was the aggressor, I was the hammer in the situation, and they in turn would kind of start to be timid and start to pull back even though I was a little guy. And so that lesson has stuck with me clear until now, where I have this mentality going into these calls that I'm not going to be timid, but I'm going to stand up, I'm going to be brave, I'm going to take this thing head on. And I have felt personally that when it comes to these big calls or presentations or these really high stress situations, if I can just decide that I'm going to be the hammer instead of the nail, if I'm going to be the aggressor, if I'm going to be the one that's confident and positive, if I can just change that mentality, it makes it much, much easier to go into these calls and just knock it out of the park. And so on the reverse side, if you feel like you're somebody that is the nail in these situations, if you go in kind of meek and timid and nervous, people are going to sense that, and it's always going to go worse for you. So my first tip is be the hammer, not the nail. The second tip that I would give you guys is ask yourself the question, what's the worst that could happen? This is something that I've tried to implement within just maybe the last year or 2 of my business. And this is a really powerful question, because if you're anything like me, it's really easy to think of the absolute worst case scenario for these calls, right? And so it's easy to kind of fixate on that. But now I'll just ask myself, like, what's the worst that could happen, right? If I absolutely botch this call, what's the worst that could happen? And oftentimes we put this pressure on ourselves as if we don't totally knock this thing out of the park, that we are going to get a bag thrown over our head and dumped in the river. And that's just not the case. Like, bad things aren't going to happen if you aren't perfect in your presentation or your call. And so just to put things into perspective, just ask yourself, like, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe if I don't do my very best, or if I stumble on my words, maybe I don't land the deal. Maybe I lose a little bit of money. And while I know a lot of you probably have a lot riding on these situations, there's no need to put all of that extra pressure on yourself, because that just doesn't help. And so dial down the pressure on yourself. You don't have the whole fate of the universe riding on this one interaction with a client or a future or potential client. And so just realize that there really isn't that bad of an outcome, even worst case scenario. And so just ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? The funny thing about this question is it helps me prepare, I guess you could say, for the worst case scenario. But inevitably, it just dials down my anxiety leading up to the call, and then I still do great. I whenever it comes to the actual call, I feel comfortable, I feel confident, and we just step up and we get it done. And so why torture yourself all the way leading up to this and acting like it's the end of the world if things don't go perfectly, knowing full well that even if they don't go perfectly, you're not going to botch it. You're not going to freeze up. You're going to do just fine, and you know that. You've done these things 100 or even 1,000 times, and so why continue to torture yourself if it's something that you know is going to go well once you get there? I've heard before that when we go through these like negative worst case scenarios in our mind, it literally has the same effect on our brains and our bodies, and it just absolutely exhausts us and tears us down. It has the same effect as it does when these negative, horrible things actually happen to us. And so if you think about that, how often do horrible things really happen to you, right? It's not that often, not nearly as often as we mentally put ourselves through. And so if every time I have a client call, I torture myself that entire day, it's taking a toll on my body, on my spirit, on my brain, on every part of me. It's absolutely wearing me down for nothing. Right? I'm creating this negative scenario, and my body and brain don't know the difference between whether it actually happened or I'm just thinking it through in my mind. And so don't put yourself through that, because it truly can be exhausting. And so instead, just tell yourself, what's the worst that could happen? If I don't land this new client, if they think that I'm an idiot, so what, right? I've got people in my life that love me. I love what I do. There's a lot of positive things going on in my life. So why am I going to torture myself for the entire day or the entire week over a call that I know is probably going to go just fine? The third tip that I have for you all is schedule all of your tough client calls, the meetings and presentations for the first thing in the morning. Don't schedule them until the very end of the day where you have to toil over them all day long. Wake up, knock out all of your calls, knock out the hardest things that you have on your schedule, and then you're feeling great the rest of the day. It's going to be easier to focus on your other work. You're going to be feeling happy. Lunch is going to be enjoyable, and you're going to be able to take your time without having this pit in your stomach and not feeling hungry, knowing that you have this big call or presentation in the afternoon. So instead of putting those off till the end of the day, schedule them in the morning, wake up, you're fresh, knock them out, and then enjoy the rest of your day because you've earned it. So I hope that these tips have been just a little bit helpful for you guys. I'm no expert, I'm no doctor, but I certainly know that all of us at some point or another, we experience this type of anxiety and stress, especially as freelancers. That's part of the job, and so we have to find ways to cope. We have to find ways to control it. Notice throughout this entire video, I didn't use the word cure your anxiety because I don't know how to cure anxiety. I can't cure my own. I certainly can't cure yours, but we can control it. We can control our emotions. We can put ourselves in check. We can do things that we know are going to dial down that anxiety and allow us to perform at as high of a level as we possibly can. And so I would just invite you guys to find the things that help you control that anxiety, whether it's things with your schedule, with your diet, with your sleep, or whether it's just waking up and looking yourself in the mirror and telling yourself that you're great and you look awesome and you can do this. And nothing wrong with a little self-affirmation. And so whatever it is that you need to do, I would just say do it. It doesn't matter what it takes, because if you can control those emotions and control that anxiety, not only are you going to live a better life and a more productive life, but you're going to live a happier life. And that anxiety isn't going to spill over into your relationships and your hobbies and all the other things that you have going on in your life. So put those things in check, and I promise you that you're going to be able to perform at a much higher level and a much happier level. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you all in the next video.